Hey everybody, this is a series of videos providing a statement analysis of the words spoken by Andrew Windsor in his interview with Emily Maitlis from BBC Newsnight. I share the transcripts on screen and provide subtitles of my commentary. I hope you find this analysis interesting. Let me know in the comments. Here we go. Emily asks, was that his appeal then? Was that what you, because you were perceived by the public as being the party prince, was that something you shared? Andrew's reply, well, I think that's also a bit of a stretch. I don't know why I've collected that title, because I never have really partied. I was single for quite a long time in the early 80s. But then after I got married, I was very happy. Andrew is not saying that's a stretch. He minimises and weakens twice by saying, I think, and a bit of. So it is not fully a stretch, and he's inadvertently admitting that he at least partially deserves the title Party Prince. I must comment that Emily is being generous with Andrew here because in the UK he was known widely as Andy, not the Party Prince. Andy is a much more pertinent title, bearing in mind the SA allegations. He says he doesn't know why he collected that title, and as he stutters over the I, we can assume that he is not comfortable talking about this, and he moves away from answering the question to give irrelevant information about being single and then being very happy after he got married. In his language, Andrew associates being married with being very happy, and the implication is, although he hasn't said it directly, that he was not happy when he was single. Why does he want us to know that he was very happy after he got married when he was not asked anything about this? It could be deflection. It is something to talk about that does not cause him anxiety. It could also be that he wants to be seen in a good light, to make it seem that he could not have done what he's been accused of because he was very happy. And very happy married men don't commit SA. Well, that would be the implication, obviously not necessarily true. The second half, Andrew says, and I've never really felt the need to go and party, and certainly going to Giuffre's was not about partying, absolutely not. When he goes back to talking about partying, he loses verbal fluency and stutters, indicating tension and his discomfort in this area. He uses Epstein's first name, indicating he retains friendly feelings towards him, which we would not expect under the circumstances. Then he uses negation to state what going to Epstein's was not about. Such negations are very sensitive because he hasn't been asked what was going to Epstein's not about. There are an almost infinite number of things he could say that going to Epstein's wasn't about. Why has he chosen to negate that it was about partying? He stresses absolutely not, which is unnecessary and just a need to persuade, so it is unreliable. As he said earlier, he remembers the dinner parties. That means that it was about partying to some extent, just particular kinds of parties. What would be important here would be for the interviewer to clarify with Andrew what he means by partying. Emily's next question, you said you weren't very good friends, but would you describe him as a good friend? Did you trust him? Andrew replies, yes, I think I probably did, but again, I mean, I don't go into a friendship looking for the wrong thing, if you understand what I mean. I'm an engaging person. I want to be able to engage. I want to find out. I want to learn. Emily asked 2 questions, which is not the best technique because it gave Andrew the opportunity to cherry pick, and he chose to answer the question about trust and ignore the question about whether Epstein was a good friend of his. He says he doesn't go into a friendship looking for the wrong thing, but this is not functional behaviour. It is necessary to be aware of what is happening around us and to take note of how people behave. So we should look out for things generally, the good, the not so good, and the wrong in people we associate with. And it is unbelievable for him to suggest that he doesn't look out for wrong things. This is also a negation, and he has not been asked, "What don't you look for?" It is an example of Andrew making a weak excuse for either perhaps turning a blind eye to what Epstein was doing, or maybe even being complicit in it. He uses the term, "if you understand what I mean," and this is a way of seeking Emily's approval, and it's a sign that he is not confident in what he has just said. The last part of this answer, he makes the self-serving and self-flattering statement that he's an engaging person. But if he buries his head in the sand in order to not see the wrong things, then that contradicts his self-flattering claim to want to find out and learn. The likely purpose of the self-flattery is he wants to be seen in a good light, and he wants people to think as highly of him as he does of himself. Unfortunately, his lack of self-awareness about how conceited he sounds by flattering himself in this way means that it has the opposite effect. In the next part of his answer, Andrew says, and so, you have to remember that I was transitioning out of the Navy at the time, and in the transition, I wanted to find out more about what was going on, because in the Navy, it's a pretty isolated business because you're out at sea the whole time. Andrew goes into controlling and patronising mode by explaining to Emily what she has to remember. This is a linguistic device to redirect the conversation back to his own agenda. And his agenda here is to deflect, to talk about irrelevant details about his time in the Navy. The purpose of him bringing up his service in the Navy may be to remind people that he is a veteran, in the hope he will be seen in a more favourable light as a result, especially as when Andrew came back from the Falklands conflict in the early 1980s, he was at the height of his popularity and was considered by many a dashing young royal hero. So Andrew commands that we must remember his time in the Navy, but it has no relevance whatsoever to his conduct in association with Epstein, and it is not answering the question. In the last part of his answer to this question, he says, and I was going to become the special representative for international trade and investment. So I wanted to know more about what was going on in the international business world, and so that was another reason for going there. And the opportunities that I had to go to Wall Street and other places to learn whilst I was there were absolutely vital. Notice how fluent Andrew is when he's speaking about his role as Special Representative for International Trade and Investment. The possible reason is because he is being more or less truthful here, and because it has nothing whatsoever to do with Epstein. He is claiming that it was another reason for going there, which is vague. Where is there? I'll assume he means to Epstein's, although he hasn't said so and we can't say it for him. The problem with this is that it is just a feeble and unconvincing excuse. He did not need Epstein for contacts or exposure to learning opportunities or anything else related to his special representative role. On the contrary, the UK Foreign Office and UK embassies around the world were able to provide him with all the opportunities to meet anybody he wanted from any organisation to find out what was going on in the international business world. Yes, learning from business leaders, going to Wall Street and other places may well have been absolutely vital, but he absolutely did not need Epstein for any of it. Emily then says he was your guest as well. In 2000, Epstein was a guest at Windsor Castle and at Sandringham. He was brought right into the heart of the royal family at your invitation. Andrew interrupts her and says, yes, but, certainly at my invitation, not at the royal family's invitation. But remember that it was his girlfriend that was the key element in this. He was the, as it were, plus one to some extent in that aspect. Again, he goes into patronising, controlling mode, demanding that Emily and the audience remember what is important to him, redirecting to what he wants to focus on. There wasn't actually a question, and he interrupts Emily to bring the topic back to his agenda. It was not necessary for Andrew to say not at the royal family's invitation, because Emily had already said that. But he interrupted and didn't let Emily finish speaking, which is a sign that he thinks what he has to say is more important, and it also demonstrates he is not a good listener and not good at taking turns in conversations. He refers to Ghislaine Maxwell as just his girlfriend and still doesn't use her name. So he offers respect to Epstein, who he claims is not a close friend, and none to Maxwell, who he claims was his friend, and that Epstein was just the plus one. So these are little details that show how his story is contradictory and unreliable. I don't usually comment on tone of voice and the pacing of what a subject is saying, but the way that Andrew states that it was his girlfriend, with emphasis on the gaps between the words, I feel is noteworthy.
Remember that it was his girlfriend that was...
It's as if he is considering Maxwell to be some kind of magic get-out-of-jail-free card he has slammed down on the table to absolve himself from the responsibility of him having brought Epstein into the heart of the British royal family. The other important point to note is that he tries to blame shift and imply that Epstein was Maxwell's plus one, and so it's her fault, not his fault. But he uses three minimising or qualifying terms that undermine the plus one claim. He says to some extent, and as it were, which is short for as if it was so, and in that aspect. So by Andrew's own choice of words, he admits inadvertently that Epstein was not completely a plus one. Additionally, to gain entry to any royal residence, especially when members of the royal family are going to be present, each person is very carefully vetted in advance by the security services. So it is not the case that Maxwell just turned up with Epstein as her plus one, but he will have been included on the official invitation list named for vetting. The plus one claim does not stand up to scrutiny, and Andrew is being deceptive. Emily then asks, am I right in thinking you threw a birthday party for Epstein's girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell at Sandringham? Andrew replies, no, it was a shooting weekend. Just a straightforward shooting weekend.
No, it was a shooting weekend.
As you can see, Andrew has a quizzical look on his face when he says, no, it was a shooting weekend, and it is my opinion that he is feigning confusion, because he goes on to speak to Emily as if she is stupid not to have realised it wasn't a party but a shooting weekend. This is where Andrew's lack of self-awareness and elitist background trips him up badly and shows he has no understanding of how ordinary people live. Instead of letting this point go, he has to correct Emily that it wasn't a party, it was a shooting weekend, as if that makes it any better instead of actually making it worse. Shooting weekends are something the vast majority of people will have no experience of, and sounds considerably more elaborate than a simple party, with the former stretching over at least a couple of days, with staff, shooting paraphernalia, accommodation, meals, transport, etc. required for everyone involved. This may be straightforward in Andrew's world, but it was a terrible error by him to argue this point with Emily instead of just agreeing it was a party. It proved him to be an arrogant, desperately out of touch, highly privileged and unattractively entitled individual, in my opinion. Emily then says, but during these times that he was a guest at Windsor Castle at Sandringham, the shooting weekend, we now know that he was and had been curing young girls for ex-trafficking. Andrew replied, we now know that at the time there was no indication to me or anybody else that that was what he was doing, and certainly when I saw him either in the United States, when I saw him in the United States or when I was staying in his houses in the United States, there was no indication, absolutely no indication. Andrew says there was no indication to him, and he adds, or anybody else. And this is him again hiding behind other people to give his version of events support. But he can't speak for anybody else, he can only speak to what he himself noticed or didn't notice. By saying anybody else, he includes in this everyone but himself, and this is undoubtedly an exaggeration and deceptive. Some of the people closer to him may have advised that they didn't notice anything, but to say that there was no indication to anybody else is a claim that Andrew can't legitimately make, and it is a manipulative manoeuvre to shield himself from responsibility and an attempt to add weight to his own position. He repeats no indication 3 times, but he only says to me after one of them. So the term no indication is very sensitive because it's repeated. It's passive, and by using it, it sounds like Andrew is saying he didn't see anything, but he is not actually saying that. He does not say specifically what there was no indication of. He just speaks vaguely by saying no indication that that was what he was doing. He is avoiding saying the specific allegations, curing young girls or ex-king, and so his denial is unreliable. A reliable denial needs to include 3 elements. It needs to be in the past tense, it must include the personal pronoun I, and the specific accusation or allegation. So a reliable denial from Andrew here would need to be something like, I didn't see any indication that Epstein was curing young girls or ex-king. If he had said there was no indication to me, that he was luring young girls or extorting, this would still not be a reliable denial, because he isn't saying he didn't see or notice anything. All he is saying is that there was no indication to me, which leaves open the possibility that there were indications to others, and just because someone doesn't notice indications doesn't mean they weren't there. The other factor that makes his denial not just unreliable but deceptive is that he goes on to talk about seeing Epstein elsewhere than in the United States, but stops and corrects himself. He ends up only saying there was no indication in the US, and by implication, he has leaked that there were indications elsewhere that he was aware of. In the next part of his answer, Andrew says, "And if there was, you have to remember that at the time I was patron of the NSPCC's Full Stop campaign, so I was close up with what was going on in those time about getting rid of abuse to children, so I knew what the things were to look for, but I never saw them." By stating "if there was," Andrew is allowing for the possibility of the existence of indications that he has just tried to deny. It seems like what Andrew is trying to say is that if there were signs, he would have spotted them because he was patron of the NSPCC and he knew what to look for. The NSPCC stands for National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. But this is not what he said, and we can't say it for him. We have to go by the words he used and the order he used them in. We would not expect him to refer to non-existent indications by using the plural pronoun them. Compare the two answers to this question. Did you see any ghosts? Answer 1, no, I didn't see any ghosts. Answer 2, no, I didn't see them. In the second answer, although the person is saying what appears to be the same as the first answer, the difference is in using the plural pronoun them, the speaker is pointing to the ghosts and just saying that they didn't see them. This is what Andrew does when he says, "I never saw them." The maxim in statement analysis is that pronouns never lie, and according to Andrew's use of the pronoun them, he acknowledges the indications existed, but he denies that he saw them. And as already mentioned, this denial is unreliable. Emily's next question is, so in 2006, in May, an arrest warrant was issued for Epstein for assault of a minor. In July, he was invited to Windsor Castle to your daughter, Princess Beatrice's 18th birthday. Why would you do that? Andrew replies, because I was asking Ghislaine. But even so, at the time, I don't think I am certainly. I wasn't aware when the invitation was issued what was going on in the United States. I wasn't aware until the media picked up on it, because he never said anything about it.
Because I was asking Ghislaine.
Notice the tone, pacing and expression on Andrew's face when he gives the answer, because I was asking Ghislaine. What do you think of it? In my opinion, he is being arrogant, patronising and contemptuous, as if the question itself is ridiculous. He says he wasn't aware when the invitation was issued, which indicates he was aware at some point after it was issued. So why not just rescind the invitation as soon as he did become aware of the charges against Epstein? Again, it's not really passing the sniff test. He is trying to imply but he had no control over who Maxwell brought to his daughter's birthday party, when this is factually untrue. Everyone invited will have been vetted in advance by the security services, and because of the need to vet people in advance, only named people are invited. This is a hollow excuse from Andrew. He's again blame shifting and trying to hide behind others to avoid responsibility. Emily then says, he never discussed with you the fact that an arrest warrant had been issued. Andrew replies, no, never discussed it, no. This is an unreliable denial. There's no pronoun for himself nor one for Epstein, and the specific accusation is also missing. A reliable denial would be something like, I didn't know anything about the arrest warrant, he never discussed it with me. So this is another deceptive answer from Andrew. The next question Emily asks is, so he came to that party knowing police were investigating him? Andrew replies, well, I'm not quite sure whether, was it police? I don't know. You see, this is the problem. I really don't know. Here, Andrew is splitting hairs. It doesn't matter whether it was the police or the FBI. The issue is Epstein was being investigated for crimes against minors, which Epstein definitely knew about. It's almost as if Andrew is trying to protect Epstein here. Why not just say yes, he came knowing he was being investigated? Instead, Andrew sets up the opportunity for him to claim that the real problem is that Andrew doesn't know. He really doesn't know. This is a misdirection and deceptive, because the facts are that Epstein went to the 18th birthday party knowing he was under investigation. So why doesn't Andrew just admit that, instead of being evasive and manipulative in trying to redefine the problem as being Andrew's lack of knowledge? Emily says it was the Palm Beach police at the time, and Andrew continues, but I'm afraid, you see, this is the problem, is that an awful lot of this was going on in the United States, and I wasn't a party to it, and I knew nothing about it. Again, Andrew engages in distancing, misdirection, and blame shifting. He only states that an awful lot was going on in the United States, which is a minimizing term and indicates that not all of it was going on in the United States. Although he does use the personal pronoun I and the past tense in his denial, it is still unreliable because he fails to include the specific allegation, so we don't know what he's actually denying. We can make assumptions, but he hasn't said it and we can't say it for him. Emily then says, in 2008 he was convicted of soliciting and procuring a minor for X. He was jailed. This was your friend. How did you feel about it? Andrew replied, well, I ceased contact with him after I was aware that he was under investigation, and that was later on in 2006, and I wasn't in touch with him again until 2010. So I just it was one of those things that somebody's going through, that sort of thing. Well, I'm terribly sorry. I can't be associate. Firstly, Andrew doesn't answer the question, how did you feel? And instead goes straight to his agenda of explaining when he ceased contact with Epstein. To use the word ceased here is a misrepresentation. He may have had longer gaps between communications, but they did not cease contact. And this is evidenced in the very next sentence when Andrew says he was in contact with him again in 2010. Very significantly, Andrew reveals his psychological disposition is to see things from Epstein's perspective and not from the victim's perspective. He doesn't condemn Epstein for his crimes, but instead eradicates the victim's experience completely by referring to it as one of those things that somebody's going through, with the somebody being Epstein. Andrew leaks here that he likely believed that Epstein had either not done anything wrong or that he had been wrongly accused, wrongly convicted. And why say to someone who has been found guilty of Epstein crimes, "I'm terribly sorry," when supposedly cutting off contact? What did Andrew have to feel terribly sorry for? This is not expected and indicates again Andrew seeing things from Epstein's and not the victim's perspective, which is highly disturbing.